Greetings and welcome back to another episode of The Greatest Show in the Galaxy, the show where I, the curator, discuss my personal favorite show of all time, personal favorite franchise of all time, Doctor Who. And before we get started, there's a bit of an apology I have to make for the listeners and watchers of the show. The air conditioner is on for the remainder of today's episode. We have a series of uncharacteristically cold days the past week. And I'm starting to come down with a little bit of something. Nothing too serious. Just, I didn't want to add to that. So the air conditioner is here for the episode to keep me warm during this time. Now, today's episode, we will be discussing the modern era companions. Obviously, a continuation of what I like to call Companions Month. Last week we talked about the classic era companions. This week is all about the modern era of companions from Doctor Who. However, before we get started with that, there are a couple of things we have to talk about. First, yesterday, as of the recording of this episode, was March 11th. And March 11th is the birthday of two major significant figures in Doctor Who. We'll start off with the more, I would say, the more relevant one. The wonderful, lovely, and talented Alex Kingston, obviously known for Doctor Who fans as playing the character of River Song, sometimes Professor, but mainly Doctor. Yes, she was introduced during the 2008 10th Doctor episode Silence in the Library and continued to play this character regularly all the way to 2015's The Husbands of River Song alongside the 12th Doctor, Peter Capaldi. She's the daughter of Amy Pond and Rory Pond, obviously, spoilers, and she eventually became the Doctor's wife at some point or another, mainly another. But I can sit here all day talk about the amazing contribution to this character and this actress has to the wonderful franchise of Doctor Who. Obviously, she had her own standalone series in Big Finish called The Diary of River Song, where she actually got to interact with Captain Jack Harkness of all people, which is a little bit weird. But she also has her own standalone series. Well, not really standalone, but it's a team-up series called The 10th Doctor and River Song, featuring the 10th Doctor himself, David Tennant. So, she is 59 years of age. She, interestingly, she was born the exact same year that the show started, just a couple of months early. And somehow she still looks better in her late 50s than I do in my late 20s. No idea how that happened. But I guess, time travel and part-time Lord and such. The next person I would like to bring up today, also born on March 11th, someone who is mostly known for outside of Doctor Who stuff, but he also did have a pretty major contribution to the world of Doctor Who. And that is, of course, the late, great Douglas Adams. He's mostly known for being the author of the great book, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but he also wrote at least 3 Doctor Who episodes during the Tom Baker era, namely The Pirate Planet, City of Death, and Shada. City of Death, obviously, is still to this day the most viewed episode of the show of all time, and Shada, in a complete 180, it actually is mostly known as the unproduced episode. It's an episode that production was halted on during the last few days of production. So they stopped filming it during midway through, and I can pretty much make an entire episode just about Shada. But interestingly enough, all 3 of these episodes that he wrote are one of the very few episodes from Doctor Who that didn't really receive their own novelizations, as pretty much every other episode of the show does, mainly because Douglas Adams refused to allow anyone to rewrite his material except for him. But and also in a 2012 interview, Stephen Moffat did confirm that the Christmas special that year, or rather the following year, I can't remember, the Snowman, the Christmas special of 2012, was partially inspired by a storyline that Douglas Adams wrote and pitched to the BBC at one point or another, called "The Doctor Retires." So his influence is still felt all across Doctor Who, even beyond the grave. He was 49 when he passed away. And on a much sadder note, March 5th of last week also saw the passing of an actress by the name of Linda Barron. She was mostly known for other stuff, but she has actually appeared in 3 episodes of Doctor Who. Well, she was an uncredited singer in the William Hartnell episode, The Gunfighters. For those of you who don't know, that episode was mostly accompanied by singing narration with a song titled The Ballad of the Last Chance Saloon, sang by Linda Barron herself. She was next seen on screen alongside the Fifth Doctor in one of my personal favorite episodes from that era, Enlightenment, as Captain Rack. And she was last seen alongside the 11th Doctor as the character Val in Closing Time. So she actually did have a major role, or rather at least a major appearance, in 3 episodes from 3 completely separate Doctors. And I like the 1-5-11-ness of it. So yeah, she was 83, I believe, when she passed away. Yeah, 82. Sorry. So on behalf of myself and on behalf of the rest of the Northern Entertainment Group, I would like to wish a very happy birthday to Alex Kingston, to the remaining friends and family of Douglas Adams, and my deepest heartfelt condolences to the remaining friends and family of Linda Barron. Thank you, all 3 of you. We quite literally could not do this without you. Now, on to some companion stuff. Honestly, I thought I was going to have a much easier time picking out select episodes for each companion like I did last week. But then I remembered that the companions in the modern era of the show have become much more interesting and complex characters than the companions in the classic era of the show. So, first of all, thank you, Russell T Davies and Stephen Moffat, for making my job harder this time around. But in all honesty, I actually like this emphasis on the companions stuff more so in the modern era of the show as opposed to the classic era. In the classic era, they were mostly just there. They didn't really add too much to the show. They were just something that someone to ask the Doctor questions so that the Doctor would have a reason to explain certain things to the audience. In the modern era of the show, they've become fully fleshed out and realized characters in and of themselves, which is why they have so many good episodes that showcase what great characters they really are. And like I said last week, I tried to keep it at least 2 or 3 episodes per companion. This time, kind of went a little bit more because there are so many good episodes that really show off, especially during the Russell T Davies era, how good each companion is. And we will be starting this off by quite naturally the one that started it all, Rose. Not only just the first companion in the modern era of the show, but also the first episode of the modern era of the show, the first episode from the 9th Doctor era. This episode really introduces something that was never quite a thing in Doctor Who: family for the companions. Now, obviously, other companions, mainly Perry and Tegan and Sarah Jane Smith, they had families, yes, for sure, but they were never really big, important parts of their character throughout the show. For the most part, most companions either lost a family member or just left a family member behind to join the Doctor. This was the first time we actually get to see a companion going back to the same place and revisiting her friends and family every once in a while. Obviously, Rose's mother, Jackie, and her boyfriend, or should I say ex-boyfriend, Mickey Smith, were both introduced in this episode, and Rose has some really great moments that show off her strength of character as well. Now, another good thing I want to point out was in the episode 2-parter, Aliens of London, and World War III. This is actually the first time we actually get to see what happens to the family that gets left behind when the companion is off traveling with the Doctor. We never really get to see that too much. Obviously, we hardly ever get to see the Doctor coming back to the same place over and over again, which is aside from maybe like the third Doctor, but that was like something very very special and unique to that particular era of Doctor Who. But yeah, the influence that the Doctor has, not just on the companion themselves, but also the people associated with the companions, is something pretty major that I feel like needs to be highlighted. And also, this episode introduced the character of Harriet Jones, the former prime minister, if you don't know who she was. But yeah, she was not necessarily a companion, but definitely a supporting character that made repeat appearances all throughout the Russell T Davies era of the show. Dalek is another great episode that's really worth a watch. Obviously, it's the introduction of Daleks in the modern era of the show, but also this episode really shows the influence that Rose had on the Doctor himself all throughout their time together. And also, this episode introduces the character of Adam Mitchell, a character we will be discussing in greater detail in next week's episode. Another good episode that Russell T Davies had to make my job harder this week is the episode Father's Day. Again, family and the dangers of changing time for the sake of personal gain. And it's really more of a what would you do in that situation type of episode. Obviously, family comes first, and for some people, family is more important than the rest of the universe, namely Rose, of course. The next episode I would like to highlight is The Empty Child and the Doctor Dances, arguably the best Ninth Doctor episodes and one of the better episodes of the modern era of the show in general. Also, this episode introduced the character of Captain Jack Harkness, as we can see in this picture right here. Now, Captain Jack Harkness, sadly, I couldn't find as many good episodes that show off how good of a companion / character he is individually, but that was mainly because that character really, really shines on his own spin-off standalone show, Torchwood, which it deserves several episodes of this show dedicated just for it in and of themselves. So I'll just say here he's one of the best companions during the modern era of the Doctor Who, and a lot of the episodes that he makes appearances in are on the show are actually on this list. So we're going to get to see him a lot all throughout this list. Now, jumping into the 10th Doctor era, obviously, who can forget the incredible and amazing and iconic school reunion, the first time we actually get to see Sarah Jane Smith back since Dimensions in Time, the 30th anniversary special, but this is actually, I mean, it gets a bit complicated. Obviously, the Sarah Jane Smith has been an on again, off again companion in mainly in specials, but this is actually the first time she gets to meet the Doctor properly. This time since they parted ways in The Hand of Fear, her last episode with the Tom Baker Doctor. And obviously, we get to see K9 back. This is a great showcase of companions past, while also how meeting a past era companion influences a modern era companion like Rose and Mickey. And also, this is the episode where Mickey officially became a companion of the 10th Doctor in that particular era. Now, Rise of the Cybermen and the Age of Steel is also a great, interesting two-parter. Obviously, again, we get to see the familial connections that Rose has with her mother and her father, except this time it's an alternate universe. So we get to see the influences of parallel universes, parallel versions of family members on a companion. And also, I believe this is probably Mickey Smith's best episode as a companion, mainly because there are two of him, and we get to see two different sides of the same coin that is Mickey Smith. And Mickey Smith really does come into his own as a character by the end of the episode, or rather the second part of the episode. Obviously, we can't leave off the episode two-parter, I should say. Army of Ghosts and Doomsday. Still to this day, one of the saddest moments in television history when the Doctor is forced to leave Rose behind uh, after some wibbly wobbly timey-wimey shenanigans ensues at the very end of the episode that also happens to involve Daleks and Cybermen on screen for the very first time. Obviously, the Daleks and Cybermen have been on screen before in the same episode, just they haven't actually met one another. So it's a bit of an interesting thing there. But obviously, the episode that introduced the character of Donna Noble, the runaway bride, and also her mother. Again, more family for a companion stuff. And moving on, we have my personal favorite David Tennant companion, and I believe my personal favorite modern era companion, Martha Jones, making her debut in the episode Smith and Jones, alongside the debut of her entire family, and also the Jedoon, which then went on to become one of the more iconic aliens from the modern era of the show. But once again, we see the strong family connections that the modern era companions have, which again, it's not something that the classic era companions ever had, or at the very least, they never tried to shine a light on that too much during the classic era of the show. It was always just like the companions are just there. They're just there to ask the Doctor questions so that the Doctor has an excuse to explain what is happening to the audience by way of explaining it to the companion. But like I said, with the Russell T Davies era especially, we see how important family is to the companions, and we also get to see that in much greater detail all throughout David Tennant's second season, or as I like to call it, the Martha season. Again, we have the Lazarus experiment. Again, we see it's setting up seeds to come in the finale episode of the show, but also we get to see some turmoil between the Doctor and Martha's family in this episode, which is something that again, is relatively new, but it's an interesting avenue to explore how the Doctor is affecting the family of the companions he chooses to come to go traveling with him. Obviously, he had a slightly, and I use that word freely, slightly better relationship with Rose's family and friends, but he just did not have a really good relationship with Francine Jones, Martha's mother, at first. But again, more on that later. Arguably, in my opinion, the best episode, mainly centering around a companion in the modern era of the show, Human Nature and Family of Blood. Strangely enough, it's a great David Tennant episode, just in my opinion, not really a great David Tennant's Doctor episode. I think it's one hell of a Martha storyline, really shows why Martha is, in my opinion, the best modern era companion of the show. But yeah, sorry, I'm sort of stumbling over my words here, but yeah, Martha is challenged in more way than just one, during all throughout this episode, and her relationship with the Doctor sort of reaches a boiling point several times all throughout the episode. But it's hard to talk about this episode too much without spoiling the plot, which I'm assuming most of you who are watching this episode right now already know. So I'll just say right here, one of my favorite episodes for Martha specifically. And let's move on to what I consider a trilogy, even though the BBC technically doesn't, and a lot of other people don't. But what I consider a trilogy of episodes is Utopia, The Sound of Drums, and Last of the Time Lords. This picture specifically is taken from Last of the Time Lords, but it gets the point across. We see all three characters were mainly the main protagonists of this trilogy of episodes. The Doctor, Martha Jones, and Captain Jack Harkness. Once again, obviously Captain Jack is back, which is great. It's always great to see Captain Jack Harkness back. And we see this is the first time we get to see a, in the modern era at least, a companion leaving and then coming back several seasons later with a completely different doctor. And there's a bit of an interesting moment where just it's him talking to the doctor and this feel of abandonment by the Ninth Doctor, who presumably left because he thought Jack was dead. Throughout the episodes, we learned that was really not the case. But yeah, it's just a lot of things that we never really did get to see in the classic era of the show. Companions feeling abandoned after being left by the, because in the classic era of the show, when a companion chooses to leave the Doctor, or when the Doctor chooses to leave a companion, they're gone. Like, there's no coming back after that. This is another big change that Russell T Davies implemented in the modern era of the show. Companions actually coming back for full-on episodes alongside the Doctor. But moving on over to Martha for a little bit, this is also it's a great showcase of the damage that being associated with the Doctor could have in a companion's family. Obviously, Martha's family is being captured and tortured for about a year, to the point where where they lost a bit of their own humanity. And I highly definitely recommend watching the extended version of Last of the Time Lords, something I didn't even know existed. But basically, there's like the regular version, the 45-minute version, and then there's the much longer version that I believe most places have, but I didn't watch that at the time when it was introduced to me. So yeah, there's a much longer version of this the Last of the Time Lords, which really does go into how each member of Martha's surviving family feels about the Master all throughout the episode, and also really shows the impact that just meeting the Master could have on a Doctor Who companion, or the companion's family, I should say. Voyage of the Damned actually features what I like to call a one-off companion in the form of Kylie Minogue's Astrid Peth. But there are a lot of one-off, like one-episode companions during the modern era of the show, especially in Christmas specials. That seems to be like a major thing. But in my opinion, out of the ones that David Tennant has had, Astrid Peth is easily the best of the quote-unquote one-off companions in these Christmas special. The Sontaran Stratagem and slash the Poison Sky is another great one. We first of all, we were introduced to the character of Wilfred Mott in Voyage of the Damned. That's another good reason for why I put this episode here on this list. But Wilfred Mott's character is much more explored in Partners in Crime, which I decided not to put on this list to try to keep it short a little bit. But this is the first time we actually get to see the Doctor interacting with Wilfred Mott, fully knowing who he is, as in Donna's grandfather, which obviously Wilfred Mott then went on to become a much more important and integral character to the 10th Doctor's run later. But, well, we'll get to that when we get to that. But yeah, we also get to see the Doctor's interactions with Donna's mother, which they met in The Runaway Bride. Next, we have... Oh, and also, sorry, I forgot. Martha is also in this episode, and we actually get to see some more interactions between two completely different companions of the same Doctor. And when Rose met Sarah Jane Smith in School Reunion, things did not really go quite as smoothly as they did when Martha met Donna in this episode. In my opinion, that just shows you how much more mature Martha and Donna are as characters, but I can go into a whole separate rant about that. And we just don't have the time for that at the moment. Next, let's talk a little bit about the Doctor's Daughter. Again, another great episode where Donna gets to show her skills as a companion Another great episode for Martha to show off her skills as a companion, as a doctor companion, and also can't really call this a one-off companion, but the doctor's daughter, Ginny, played by Georgia Moffat, which then went on to be um, David Tennant's wife, and she's also the daughter of the fifth Doctor, Peter Davison, uh, and she also got her own standalone series on Big Finish later in life. So yeah, sort of a three companion episode, but I believe each individual companion does get her own chance to shine in this episode, and it's one of my personal favorite episodes of that season overall. Silence in the Library and Forest of the Dead, the introduction episode of Alex Kingston as uh, Professor River Song. Yes, she's a professor now. And her interactions with the Doctor. Honestly, the episode itself isn't quite as remarkable as you like to think, but what really does sell it and really what elevates it is knowing the character of River Song. Obviously, when this episode first aired, there was a lot of mystery and questions surrounding the character of River Song, mainly because it was a completely brand new character to the Doctor Who canon, a character none of us knew who she was. It's a character that was later expanded upon in greater detail during the 11th Doctor's era, but at the time, the episode itself, the main hook for it was, and ironically still remains to this very same day, River Song herself. But at the time, it was the lingering questions of who is she? What is her connection to the Doctor? Why is she so important? Why does she have this way of? Why does she feel the way she feels about the 10th Doctor? And nowadays, after having all of her storyline essentially being told to us from start to finish, quite literally from birth to death, this episode was kind of elevated to a much higher stance now that you know the history that River Song has with the Doctor and her connection that she has with the Doctor. It's a very interesting shift from when this episode first aired to when this episode rewatching this episode today, and just again shows you the incredible power that Stephen Moffat had as a writer and a showrunner of the show. Going back to Russell T Davies for a little bit, we have Turn Left, in my opinion, the best Donna episode, and also shows how important Donna is as a character. It's one of those episodes the Doctor Who does from time to time that shows you that the little decisions we make in life can have massive consequences and repercussions later in our own personal lives. And none of us really quite know how important or impactful we are as people on other people. Obviously, Donna being there to stop the Doctor in the Runaway Bride. If she wasn't there, a lot of things could have gone in a completely different direction. But yeah, it's another episode of just like I said, it shows you how important certain characters are and how integral the modern era companions are to the show and how big of an impact they have on the Doctor himself or herself in the modern era of the show. And also, it's a great episode that shows a sort of relationship between Donna and Rose, which again, one of my personal favorite things is just companions getting to interact with each other, and we've seen that a lot on this list today, and we're going to see that a lot still as we journey into the Journey's End, or rather, the Stolen Earth and Journey's End. In my personal opinion, still to this day, the best episode of Doctor Who ever of all time. Period. End of sentence. And just look at the multitude of companions we have here. Standing in the TARDIS together, we have Donna, Martha, Captain Jack, Rose, Jackie, Mickey, and of course, Sarah Jane Smith. And just, there's a period of time during the Stolen Earth where the Doctor and Donna are basically nowhere to be seen for a couple of minutes, and all we really get is just the individual companions from the Sarah Jane adventures and Torchwood and other stuff doing stuff together on planet Earth without the Doctor. And again, it shows you the interactions between individual companions when the Doctor is not around, and just how important these characters have become to protecting the Earth during the Russell T Davies era. So yeah, it's one of my personal favorite. It's my personal favorite episode of all time. Let's move on. Planet of the Dead gets an honorable mention for me, for no other reason than it shows us again another one-off companion in the character of Lady Christina de Souza, who ironically enough also got her own Big Finish series of Doctor Who several years before Jenny did. So I'm still a little bit upset by that, but regardless, she was a great companion to the 10th Doctor for just this one episode, and she could have gone on to be a much bigger companion if the Doctor would have considered to keep her on as a companion. But she, like I said, she got her own Big Finish series and became a much bigger companion, much bigger character, I should say, without the aid of the 10th Doctor. The 10th Doctor's final episode, that's a weird picture, but never mind. The 10th Doctor's last episode, The End of Time, featuring Wilfred Mott as a official full-on companion this time around. And yeah, it's the 10th Doctor's final episode, so that's worth a watch in and of itself. But again, just the character of Wilfred Mott is one of the best in the show, and just a representation of how big and important the modern era companions have become. Moving on to the 11th Doctor, we have the 11th Hour, which introduces us to Emilia Pond and Rory Williams as individual characters will later become much more important as companions. Sorry, my brain just went off for a second there. But yeah, the introduction of Amy Pond and Rory Williams is another great one. Also, like I said, it's Matt Smith's first episode as the Doctor, so obviously it's worth a watch just for that. But Amy and Rory, I think, are among the most important characters in modern Doctor Who, especially for the 11th Doctor. Exclusively, I should say, for the 11th Doctor, because they were only really companions for that particular Doctor. But yeah, the 11th Hour, it's a really good episode. Watch it. Whoops, no idea what happened there. The return of Dr. Riversong, not Professor yet, but Dr. Riversong in the episode The Time of Angels and Flesh and Stone. There's a bit of a weird stuff that happens in this episode when Riversong, who knows that she's actually Amy's daughter, but she never says anything, and the way she tries so hard to keep it a secret throughout multiple episodes, but this one in particular is really amazing and incredible to watch. And also it furthers the mythology set up behind the Weeping Angels. Whether or not you liked that expansion of the mythology or not is kind of irrelevant. It still keeps the angels as great foils to the Doctor, and some really bad stuff happened to Amy in this episode, and some certain rather questionable things Amy does at the very end of the episode, which really just it gets more explored throughout the remainder of her time traveling with the 11th Doctor. Next, we have Amy's Choice. Another really great way to showcase how important the characters of Amy and Rory are and have been to the Doctor and will continue to be throughout the remainder of the 11th Doctor's run. And also, it's an episode with an awful lot of foreshadowing, namely Rory dying, obviously, and Amy being pregnant in this episode. And I believe there was one more thing that I can't quite remember at the moment. But yeah, for the most part, lots of really great foreshadowing in this episode alone. And also introduces a character that I kind of wish they bring back at some point, or a version of that character, I should say, in the form of the Dream Lord. Now, I apologize in advance, but I still, whatever your opinions on this person in particular, James Corden, he did have 2 episodes on Doctor Who during the 11th Doctor's era. And what again, I know some people have certain opinions on this person, James Corden, but be that as it may, he did actually make for a very funny and interesting character during the 11th Doctor's run. And I believe the episode The Lodger, while in and of itself not really a great episode to begin with, but the Doctor does some really fun stuff in it. And watching the reactions that James Corden's Craig Owens has during this episode is pretty funny and hilarious in and of themselves. The Pandorica opens and the Big Bang. Again, Stephen Moffat really did not make this easy on me by giving such a heightened level of importance to the companions during his stint as the showrunner of the show. But be that as it may, those 2 episodes are still great, and it really does, like I said, it shows off the importance of Amy and Rory, how big these characters are, and how big of an influence they have on the Doctor. It's a great episode for River's Song also, and it's one of the better season finales in the modern era of the show. My personal favorite Christmas special in all of Doctor Who, A Christmas Carol. Obviously, this is, again, another one of those one-off companion episodes, this time in the form of Kazran Sardik and Abigail, with the Doctor essentially being the ghost of Christmas past and the ghost of Christmas future, with Amy and Rory sort of being the ghosts of Christmas present. But yeah, it's one of the best episodes of the show, and like I said, my personal favorite Christmas special, and a very interesting take on the Christmas Carol story as a whole. And who would have thought Dumbledore would have made a great Ebenezer Scrooge type character? So yeah, there's that. The Impossible Astronaut / Day of the Moon. Again, it's another episode that really emphasizes how much the Doctor has had an influence on his friends, on his companions, Amy, Rory, and River, and what happens when, at least for a moment, they think he's dead. And this whole idea of they know what happens to him all throughout the episode, but they never actually talk about it because it might actually influence certain things. And I'm just now noticing the specific picture I chose actually highlights a person standing behind the car. Yeah, so it's a weird picture. So who's there? Who's standing there? Is it one of the Silents, perhaps? I don't know. I keep forgetting every time I look away. But yes, so great 2-parter of an episode, and a great way to open Matt Smith's second season, which is, in my opinion, the best of his season. The Doctor's Wife. Not really the best episode for Amy and Rory, but I had to put it on this list, if for no other reason than for the fact that it actually shows us the Doctor's true wife and the Doctor's true companion, or is it he's her companion? It's the TARDIS, obviously, the Doctor and the TARDIS actually being able to interact and to talk to one another for the very first time since the show's beginning. So yeah, I still technically consider the TARDIS a companion of the Doctor just as much as anything else. Even going so far as to the end of Twice Upon a Time, when the Doctor is sort of having a conversation with the TARDIS, saying that and we actually get to see the relationship that the Doctor and the TARDIS have in many, many episodes, but in none more so than in this one. Now, A Good Man Goes to War, I think, is the Stephen Moffat equivalent of The Stolen Earth and Journey's End. Obviously, not as good of an episode, in my opinion, but it really just showcases a whole host of companions, namely Amy, Rory, River, but it also introduces us to what would later become known as the Paternoster Gang. We see Strax, Madame Vastra, and Jenny, and also we get introduced to Dorian Maldavar. More on him later, but or rather next week. But yes, the main reason I consider this episode similar to The Stolen Earth and Journey's End is because we see a multitude of companions all acting to help the Doctor individually and unitedly. Is that even a word? Unitedly? And united, I should say. But the main difference here is with The Stolen Earth and Journey's End, we've had years, seasons of attachment to each and every single one of those characters that we saw interacting with one another on screen. This episode really does introduces us to a whole host of brand new companions we've never seen before, but then went on to become much bigger characters in and of themselves all throughout the remaining Stephen Moffat era. So it's sort of like the reverse of The Stolen Earth and Journey's End, but also Doctor Who is a show that mainly thrives on repeat viewing. So once you actually familiarize yourself with the Paternoster Gang, who also got their own Big Finish series later in life, your attachment to these characters has grown exponentially by the next time you watch this episode. Let's Kill Hitler is actually a good episode focusing on River Song. Obviously, the other two companions, Amy and Rory, do take a bit of a back seat during this episode, but it's a great episode for River Song, and it's a great emphasis on the relationship that River Song has with the Doctor, and also it sets up so many great things to come in the remaining episodes from the Matt Smith era. Once again, we jump back into the other James Corden episode, Closing Time, which also features Linda Barron, which we talked about earlier in this episode. But yes, again, whatever your opinions on James Corden, I might actually agree with you, but there's no denying that his character did make a bit of an impact on the 11th Doctor era. Now, again, trying to separate the art from the artist, his character is actually pretty kind of funny, in my opinion, and I enjoy his character on the show for that. The Wedding of River Song. One thing's for certain, Stephen Moffat really did know how to make season finales. 50% of the time, in my opinion. More on that later. But yeah, again, a great showcase for River Song and Amy and Rory in many different ways. And it has one of the sadder moments plural, of the Matt Smith era, with obviously the reveal that the Brigadier has passed away, which also happened around that time. And that moment brings me to tears every single time. We see great interactions between Amy and multiple versions of River Song in this episode. But yeah, it's a really good episode, in my opinion. Let's move on. Another one-off companion, each introduced in The Doctor, the Widow, and the Wardrobe. It's a good fine episode, I would say. But yeah, it's a one-off. It's a one-off. Let's move on. The Power of Three. I was tempted to put Dinosaurs on a Spaceship on this list. Invasion of the Dinosaurs is a completely different episode, but The Power of Three, again, it shows you the level of importance that Amy and Rory have in this era of Doctor Who, and how big of individual characters they have become, and how much of an influence they have become on the Doctor. And also, it's another great episode that shows us Brian Williams, played by Mark Williams, also known as Arthur Weasley on the Harry Potter movies. But yeah, and also it's the episode that introduces Kate Stewart into the Doctor Who mythos, and the revamped unit for the remaining Stephen Moffat era. So yeah, it's a great episode with lots of great characters, and it's sort of a milestone episode, I should say. Now, if you thought Army of Ghosts / Doomsday was wasn't sad enough, prepare your tissues for The Angels Take Manhattan. In my opinion, it's not really a great Weeping Angels episode. It's not a great Weeping Angels story, but as far as a companion piece, quite literally focusing on the companions, it's great. It's Amy and Rory's final episode together in the TARDIS. It's one of the sadder moments of Doctor Who, when both Amy and Rory die twice during this episode, and also a great episode featuring River Song here. Obviously, it was kind of inevitable. We knew it was coming eventually. We're going to have to talk about Clara Oswald at one point or another on this show. But yeah, The Snowman, the episode I mentioned earlier, which was slightly influenced by Douglas Adams. It's a great episode that shows the Doctor with the Paternoster gang, which I mentioned earlier. So it's always great to see them back whenever possible. But I guess Clara is also here. Not the main Clara. This one is Clara Oswald, the 1800s governess version of the character. And obviously, it was later revealed that Clara Oswald has many different forms, including Oswin, which was introduced in Asylum of the Daleks. I personally decided not to put that episode on this list, just because I didn't think it was worthy enough of being on the list with some of these other episodes. Next, we have The Rings of Acaten. It's an episode that I think I mentioned this several times before. I love it and hate it at the same time. And well, the Clara is a pretty central figure all throughout this episode. And again, I can go into a whole rant about my personal opinions on Clara Oswald, but this is not the purpose of today's episode. This is not the purpose of this show. There's no room for negativity on this show, at least as long as I'm still running it and as long as I can avoid it. So yeah, it's an episode that really shows Clara's skill as a companion. One of my least favorite scenes is that she's able to single-handedly destroy the planet-sized parasite that even the Doctor was unable to, and she uses that. She does that using something very important to her, and she makes a great sacrifice in order to do that. So yeah, it's a really good episode for Clara Oswald, and it also features one of my favorite Doctor scenes of all time, one of the great Doctor speeches of all time. Journey to the Center of TARDIS is an episode that does something that not a lot of other modern episodes of Doctor Who do, and also not a lot of the classic episodes do either. It shows us the inside of the TARDIS like never before. The multiple rooms, multiple levels, just all the random things that the TARDIS has that we never really get to see in Doctor Who ever. The TARDIS is being explored in great detail in this episode. And there are some, I would say, good moments featuring Clara. Good moments, that is, if you are a fan of this character, that is, I should say. The Name of the Doctor, an episode I don't particularly like for obvious reasons, but we do see the Paternoster gang back. We see River Song back for her final appearance with the 11th Doctor, and technically speaking, her last appearance, period, even after her death, which is something interesting that I was always hoping Stephen Moffat would explore at one point or another, but he never did. So, yeah, I'm still holding on hope that we get to see Alex Kingston again back in Doctor Who to some capacity, but it gets increasingly less and less likely that we'll ever do. But obviously, this is the episode where Clara really does get elevated to a much higher stance than she previously was. And it shows you why Clara is as big of a character as she is, and why she is as important of a character to the Doctor as she has become. My least favorite episode of the show of all time. Listen, first of all, it's an episode that, again, if you are a fan of Clara Oswald, if you are a fan of Danny Pink, this is the episode for you. If you, this is another episode that really emphasizes how big of an important character she has become and how influential she has become on the Doctor's life, and going all the way back, similar to the name of the Doctor, where she actually went back and interacted with every single other previous Doctor. In this episode, we see Clara interacting with the Doctor as a young child. Still can't believe I'm actually praising this episode, but still, this episode again, as Soda was so keen to remind me, this episode won a whole ton of awards and praise and critical acclaim. That it's an episode that is worth the watch for that reason alone. The Caretaker is actually an episode that I really, really like. One of my personal favorite episodes from Peter Capaldi's first season, and in my opinion, the rockiest of all Doctor Who first seasons. I still stand by it to this day. It might be the worst first season for for a new Doctor coming in, and the main reason I say might be is mainly due to a technicality. But yeah, the Caretaker, one of my personal favorite episodes from the Peter Capaldi era, especially his first season, and it's a great episode that shows us the interactions that he has with Danny Pink and the interactions that Clara Oswald has with the character of Danny Pink, and it's I would say it's a good showcase of who Danny Pink's character is as a companion. Now, Dark Water and Death in Heaven. I keep getting those two mixed up, but yeah, it's a. Now look, it's this is what I was saying earlier, that Stephen Moffat can make a great season finale half of the time. This is kind of what I meant. I really, really enjoyed the Pandorica opens and the Big Bang. I really liked the Wedding of River Song. As I mentioned earlier, not the biggest fan of the Name of the Doctor, and I'm also not the biggest fan of Dark Water / Death in Heaven. I also, well, we'll get to that later. But yeah, this episode shows a great relationship between Clara Oswald and Danny Pink, and we also get to see Priscilla Osgood back from Day of the Doctor. We see Kate Stewart back again. We also see a little bit of the Brigadier in some form or another. So yeah, a lot of companions in this episode, not the least of which is actually Missy, or rather the Master in woman form, seen for the very first time in Doctor Who, or rather confirmed who she is. And Missy then later went on to become an actual full-on companion of the 12th Doctor later in Capaldi's run. But yeah, this episode, I think it's a really, really good Missy episode. Moving on, we have the two-parter of The Girl Who Died and The Woman Who Lived. And there are two pictures because those episodes are so incredibly different from one another that even though the BBC technically considers them two-parters, it's very easy to see, to consider them as not two-parter of an episode. But really, while Clara doesn't have much to do in the girl who died, and she's not at all in The Woman Who Lived. I mainly put these two episodes on here for specifically for Maisie Williams' character, a shielder, which was later renamed Me. Yeah, she's sort of she's sort of become a villainous character later on, but she's still technically, in my personal opinion, considered a pseudo companion, if that's even a thing. That's how I would categorize it, as a pseudo companion of the Doctor. Next, we have Hellbent, another one of those reasons why I said earlier that Stephen Moffat can actually make a good season finale half of the time. I personally am not a big fan of this episode, but it does have some moments, especially with the Doctor and Rassilon. But yes, it's an episode that, once again, it shows us the heightened level of importance that Clara Oswald has as a character, as a companion, and it also does show Maisie Williams' character and why I personally consider her a pseudo companion. If that really does make sense to you. Then next we have Alex Kingston's last episode of the show in The Husbands of River Song, and still to this day the only episode that she's done with Capaldi in Doctor Who. It's a really good episode, and it's a really great way to end this character's progression on the show. It's a really great wrap up to her storyline, and it's both funny and emotional. It's one of those Doctor Who episodes that can make you cry just as easily as it can make you laugh. And also it's a great introduction to the character of Nardole, which was later became a full-on companion of the 12th Doctor during his final season. Speaking of which, next we have the return of Dr. Mysterio. Again, we see Nardole here as an actual official companion for the very first time, and we see the Doctor and Nardole basically doing their relationship, rather what their relationship would eventually become in the follow-up season. There's also a great one-off companion in the form of Grunt, the main superhero character in the episode. But it's a really fun one, and I highly recommend watching it. Next, we have The Pilot, Bill's debut episode, and a great episode that sets up lots of things to come for the remainder of the season. Now, sadly, I couldn't quite pinpoint a really, really good episode that focuses on Bill as a companion, other than, obviously, the Monk trilogy. Now, the Monk trilogy does people, it has received certain levels of criticism. It's not really one of a lot of people's favorite episodes, but the trilogy in and of itself, I consider it really, really great, and it's a great showcase of why Bill is as good of a companion as she is, and in my personal opinion, a better Peter Capaldi companion than Clara Oswald. I know I'm in the minority on that, but I'm fine being on that island on my own. And also, it's a great episode for Nardole, the best Peter Capaldi companion, in my opinion. Next, we have Bill's penultimate episode, and also Peter Capaldi's penultimate episode, the two-parter, World Enough and Time, and The Doctor Falls. It's a great episode for Bill. A lot of really, well, not really great, I should say, a lot of really bad, horrible stuff happened to Bill in this episode, but it's a really good Nardole episode, and it's also a really good Missy episode, which, again, this is the episode where she technically does become a official companion of the Doctor. Missy, that is. Next, we have The Woman Who Fell to Earth. And also, if I had to go back and say, yes, I do actually really like this episode, which is why I said earlier, Stephen Moffat can make a really good season finale half the time. I would say 3 out of 6 is his track record so far. The Woman Who Fell to Earth, Jodie Whittaker's first episode, which also introduces us to what will become her fam of companions all throughout her the majority of her run, with Ryan Sinclair, Yasmin Khan, Graham O'Brien, and Grace, which sadly she only had like a handful of episodes. She never really did make it to being a full companion, but it's a great introduction to all four of these characters, and a great way of showing how these specific companions are companions of the Doctor. Rosa, in my opinion, Jodie Whittaker's best episode as the Doctor, and it's an episode that really heavily focuses on racism and prejudice, and considering that the Doctor has two companions who are person of color during her run, this episode really does it strikes true to a lot of people, and there's a lot of really great moments between Yaz, Ryan, and Graham all throughout this episode. Another episode that really heavily focuses on Yaz, and another episode that also focuses pretty heavily on racism and prejudice, Demons of the Punjab. Again, one of my personal favorite episodes from the Jodie Whittaker era, and it's a great showcase of Yaz and family, which is again, remember that word family is something we haven't really talked about much since Russell T Davies left. Yeah, this is Chris Chibnall's attempt at making the companions more family focused during his run. And another attempt at that is the episode Resolution, Jodie Whittaker's first Dalek story, and a lot of really great family stuff and characters. And great character stuff happen with Ryan all throughout this episode. Spyfall is, despite certain things that might have happened towards the end of the second half of this episode, I really do enjoy the episode of Spyfall, and there's a moment in this episode, especially towards the second half, where the Doctor gets separated from her companions for a while, and her companions have to sort of work things out on their own, and discussing. And there's some really good moments where they are discussing the Master without the Doctor. And obviously, in The Sound of Drums, there is a moment between the Doctor, Martha, and Captain Jack, where the Doctor explains who the Master is and what he means to him, to both of them. But in this episode, we get none of that. We get Graham, Ryan, and Yaz just talking amongst themselves about who the Master is, and this idea that the Doctor never really does explain who she is and where she came from, and why this Master is such a big important character to her. Another good episode that I believe focuses heavily on companions is Fugitive of the Jedoon. Obviously, we get the introduction of the Fugitive Doctor in the form of Joe Martin, and technically speaking, her companion. We also get to see him in this episode. There's some good moments between the Doctor and her companions, but also, obviously, we gotta talk about the return of the one, the only, Captain Jack Harkness. Again, this is another one of those moments where we get to see companions from previous Doctors interacting with current companions in the modern era, and I just love it. I eat it up. I really wish we actually got to see the Doctor on screen with Captain Jack in this episode, but it's something we actually got to see in the next time Captain Jack showed up in Revolution of the Daleks. And again, another one of those episodes that focuses heavily on the feeling of abandonment, when Yaz, Ryan, and Graham feel like the Doctor just left them behind for 10 months after what everything that happened at the end of the Timeless Children episode. And there's a really emotional moment with between Yaz and the Doctor. There's a really good emotional moment between Yaz and Captain Jack, where he just explains how he felt abandoned by the Ninth Doctor at the very end of the Parting of the Ways, and then when he actually got reunited with the Doctor in Utopia. And Captain Jack really does have a lot to teach his fellow companions of the Jodie Whittaker era. War of the Sontarans is in contention for being my personal favorite Sontaran episode of all time. It's really up there with in the Invasion of Time, but it's a great showcase of Dan's character, Dan Lewis, the brand new character introduced in the previous episode, the Halloween Apocalypse. But yeah, it's a great showcase of him as a companion and him as a character, and he really does have a lot of fun taking out Sontarans with a wok, or rather a frying pan. I'm not really sure, but we also get to see his parents in this episode, which is also really really fun stuff. Now, once upon a time, or rather, once upon a time is how I name it. Not one of my personal favorite episodes from that season, but if for no other reason, this episode does really show an emphasis on the fugitive doctor and her companions. Sort of. Uh, it's a bit of a weird way of showing off the fugitive doctor with her companions by way of having the current Doctor, Jodie Whittaker, with her current companions taking on the role of the other companions. It's a bit of a weird, one of those weird stuff that can only happen in a show like Doctor Who, but we also get to learn a little bit more of each character's backstory. We learn about Vender's backstory and his relationship with the Grand Serpent, but more importantly, we learn more about Yaz's history and Dan's history. Finally, for this list, we have Survivors of the Flux. Again, it's another one. It's an episode where the Doctor has been separated from Yaz and Dan. So basically, Yaz and Dan, along with Eustachius Jericho, have to travel the world together for 3 years, I think, searching for the Doctor and searching for ways of helping to stop and prevent the flux from happening and getting to be reunited with the Doctor. And it's also another episode that really showcases how Yaz definitely has feelings for the Doctor. And also, Kate Stewart is back in this episode. We get to see Kate Stewart back, and there's a sort of a minor cameo of Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart, voice only, throughout this episode. But yep, this is the major list of episodes. I apologize if I stumbled over my words a little too much throughout this episode. Remember, it's been a pretty long week, and I'm feeling a little bit under the weather. But I powered through, just as a doctor would, to give you this episode and this long breakdown of episodes from all of the modern era companions. Again, it's as much as a composite list as I could muster under the circumstances. And just look at this. Just look at this picture with all these great, wonderful companions sharing the same frame at the same time. But obviously there are so many other companions I didn't get to talk about. But that is a story for another time. Anyways, I'm going to wrap this up, and I gotta lie down and give my voice some time to rest. Hopefully I didn't mess myself up too much during this episode. But this has been this week's episode of The Greatest Show in the Galaxy. Join us next week as we talk about some more obscure companions, if you know what I mean. And if you've seen my episode where I talked about, quote-unquote, the obscure Doctors, you should have some idea of what you're in for with that episode. Anyways, I have been me. You have been you. If you really enjoyed hearing me talk about Doctor Who, I also talk about other stuff on my own YouTube channel, 50 Shades of Geek. I'm also occasionally on Twitch. I also show up on other shows on this channel, namely Northern Countdown with Soda and Ben. Speaking of Ben, you can also check him out on his individual channel, his channel, Multiverse of Geekdom. Up until recently, we also had Jess the Kiwi and Taco on this channel. They've moved on to to having their own channels. I believe Taco's channel is called Something to Taco About, and Jess's channel is simply titled Jess the Kiwi. So make sure to check them out. We also have other shows on this channel featuring Snark and Daniel, and sometimes Dave, a show called Have You Seen This, where they talk about other TV shows aside from Doctor Who. We also have Mount Schmodown, a show with Ryan Payne, talking about there is Schmodown Competitors. We also have Schmodown Analytics with Double D. On this channel, we have Rewind the Tape with Soda and Ben again. I believe they're about to wrap up their breakdown of every single Batman movie leading up to The Batman, which released a couple of weeks ago. That is every show I can remember we have on this channel. If I'm forgetting anything, maybe I'll remember it next week when I'm much more sober and much more able to make coherent sentences. But yeah, this we have so many shows on this channel, and like I say every week, it would mean the world to us if you could consider subscribing and liking our shows. Anyways, I really have to stop talking now and go lie down. So yeah, I'll just leave you with that for the time being. And until next time, everybody, Raggedy Man, good night.